Hello everyone and welcome back to Geek Chef Gaming. I am your host Chris the Geek Chef Tracy, bringing you back another Solium Infernum beginner's guide. This time we are going on Relics. You can think of this as a companion piece to the Archfiend video I released earlier, and you can basically watch these in any order because relics are essentially the only real way you're going to customize your chosen characters, so having a good idea who the Archfiends are to begin with and what they can do is a good starting point. Because Astaroth will always have this stat line, Belial will always have this stat line, etc., etc. But by changing the accessories, you can change how you can play. You can even change some of your victory conditions, depending on the accessories you have. And, well, let's get into that, shall we? First off, you have 3 accessory slots. Rings eat 1, amulets eat 2, and the crown eats 3. Generally speaking, they get more powerful as you go up. And you get to choose how you want to tweak your character based off of those things. You can do 3 small buffs, 1 medium buff, and a small buff, or 1 huge potentially game-changing one. But let's start with the rings. And first is Ring of Command. Increase command rating by 2. This just means you can have larger armies without leveling up Wrath. This can be useful if you don't plan on putting too many points into Wrath, like Wrath 2, so you get Martyr and then leave it at that. That's not a bad option. In that case, because more units usually means a bit more versatility on the map. Ring of Glory. Gain 1.5 experience points from combat. Well, at least Legion on Legion combat. Normally they gain 1 experience point per victory. This time they get 1.5. So, like, if you're playing pretty aggressively, Beelzebub, for example, would be a good example of a more aggressive Archfiend. This would work good, but if you like engaging in combat or trying to dominate the map militarily or capturing points of power, this is worth considering. Ring of the Renewal, pretty much boost your healing rate. If you have a weaker starting Legion, this could be useful because you're probably going to take quite a bit of damage starting out, and having a turn or 2 of bonus regen before you wander the map a bit more can be helpful. But by mid to late game, you're probably trying to avoid damage if possible, simply because you know how the math works and have abilities to tweak the stats in a way that you can avoid damage. Healing's always useful, but it's one of those things that, due to the lethality of combat in the late game, it kind of peters out. Praetor duels get 1.5 experience points for the duelist. Useful if you like to duel a lot, obviously. And this lets your Praetor get more powerful in dueling. Unlike a Legion, however, if a Praetor levels, it doesn't really make the Praetor better for actual Legion on Legion combat. Those are tied to its core stats and abilities. But leveling up a Praetor does grant it a bonus power when it comes to actual dueling, so this makes your duelists better. Ring of Tautology, I think I said that right. Extra manuscript fragment when seeking manuscripts, so rather than 3, it's 4. Useful because it if you're looking for like schematics or treaties, because it's an extra draw. But if you're not really willing to put in the effort to build up manuscripts because you think they take too much time, there are far better rings and other things you can put in that slot. Ring of the Arcane, Spirit, Ritual Strength for Destruction, both offense and defense. It's the only ring that actually affects the stat. It only one stat. Like one might be Deceit, the other Prophecy, for example. But if you like throwing out debuffs and lightning, very good to pick up. And if you're worried about other people using destruction spells on you, might also be worth picking up, simply because the +2 to defense may mean those higher end destruction abilities that can potentially wipe your dudes out in one go can fail, and which is good for you because they burn resources for no gain, and your dude stays alive. Ring of the Collector, extra attachment slot for basically everything. Well, places of power, it says here. I often find it not worth equipping places of power with stuff, but I will admit throwing a few stratagems on them can be useful. It depends on how much you actually want to invest to keep them safe. And it's also worth noting that places of power can level up like legions if they successfully successfully kill invading forces. So it might be a little funny to see stuff, your places of power actually fight off invaders on their own, but again, I think there's stronger stuff out there. Ring of the Liar is a good example of that. +1 to Deceit, -2 to Prophecy. 2 to Prophecy resistance, so this makes you steal shit better, and screw with your opponent a little bit more effectively, at the same time making it harder for people to spy on you magically. Pretty good. Especially if you like playing a more behind-the-scenes character, but I think its main strength is the Deceit bonus, simply because Deceit's such a strong tree. It's also worth noting that the rings that manipulate stuff like this one, there's another one for Prophecy, it's for the strength of the spell, not for the associated stat. It's worth mentioning, it has to do with the math of how spells work and how spell resistances work. Effectively, the game checks your power level when you cast a spell, adds any relevant bonuses from relics, places of power, artifacts, etc., and adds all that together and has your spell strength. The spell itself may have a plus or minus modifier depending on if it's designed to penetrate defenses, or if it's meant to be a harder spell to resist in general. A good example would be Steal Artifact. You might be able to loot the vault for tribute tokens on a person relatively easy, but on that same target you might not... Artifact could always seem to fail. And I think the calculation is simple. It compares your spell strength to the opponent's defense, and if strength exceeds defense, it works. If defense ties or exceeds strength, it fails. There's not really any real RNG there, I don't think. That said, there are ways to manipulate spell strength through either using spells to boost a target's vulnerability and all that, but it mostly comes down to this being prophecy resistance. You usually don't care if someone's looking at you too much, unless you are trying to play super low profile and be a secretive dude. Because, oh, you know my stat is 3. Okay. You now know my secret plans. That could be an issue. And at super high levels, your opponent can actually find out what your relics are, which is worth mentioning. All these are normally hidden when the game starts. So if someone rushes prophecy, they might know how you've built your character and deduce how you're going to play and develop a counter strategy. But it depends, again, how much people actually use the scouting spells. Personal Guard starts with a promotion, Ring of Loyal Servant. It is what it says on the tin. You basically have a level 3 rather than a level 2 starting Legion. And that means they get a slight stat buff right from the beginning, and become a bit more resistant to spells, because the core resistance for a unit is based off of its level. Very useful, especially if you have one of the weaker starting legions, but this is a good one for pretty much everybody. Yeah, this is Ring of the Seer, +1 ritual strength for prophecy, 2 resistance for deceit. Very good one, especially because deceit tree is got some very potent later level spells that can really mess with you. And the benefit of this one is definitely the resistance, deceit resistance, because most people aren't going to really worry too much about prophecies being put on them. They see that as a pass-fail, and it's up to the player's own skill to figure out what they're going to do with that information. +1 tribute to draw. So this adds basically an extra coin to your selection pool. So you can get an extra coin. This means more money, and again, always useful, but not super overpowered. Hold an additional event card, Ring of Unusual Prescience, a natural prescience. Having an extra event is useful, but sometimes you may, due to how the RNG happens whenever you're regent and have to draw an event, they could just be nothing of use. Sometimes they combo very well. A good example would be maybe, I believe it's called Amnesty or Pardon, but basically it restores you to normal status if you're excommunicated, and combine that with diplomatic immunity, and you can, let's say you're a blood vassal, but your prestige has far outstripped that of your liege lord, and so you want to claim victory for yourself and not just ride on their coattails. Purposely attack Pandemonium, become excommunicated, and then pop Amnesty, and then immediately pop, on the same turn, diplomatic immunity, so no one can insult you or make demands of you, and thus keep you out of war. So now you're all but untouchable from a diplomatic standpoint, as you've got a massive amount of points. Or summon the angel to screw with everyone, and before you think it's going to hit you, summon the Abyss Leviathan, to try to provoke the angel into attacking that and getting it out of your way and protecting your stuff. This can be useful, is surprisingly useful, but it takes some forethought to use. Now we're getting into the amulets. These are by nature a bit more powerful, but as you can see down here on the default ones for Asmodan, or whatever, whoever I selected on, I'm tired, my brain ain't working. They eat up 2 slots, and so you can only equip a ring with them after that. But Amulet of Archer's Precision basically gives a bonus to your ranged attribute. Equal to Prophecy, it seems. Okay. This is very good if you're trying to do if you're doing a Prophecy build, and you're also trying to get a lot of archery focused, or ranged focused legions, because how the combat works is ranged first, melee second, infernal third. So if you just stack a lot on ranged, you can one-shot enemies or weaken them to a point where you can take them out in the later phase fairly easily, with minimal risk to your characters. So not a bad one. This is one of the many stat-related ones. There's one of these for each of the 5 main powers, and it basically force sets that power to be leveled 2. In this case, it's Charisma. And it's also worth mentioning that you will never drop below 2. So an event happens that, oh, your stat's supposed to drop. Well, with this, it won't drop ever below 2. The benefit of this is it helps you customize your powers a bit more. It can boost, like this one would boost from 1 to 2. It might take someone who has a 0 charisma to 2. But pretty useful. And another good thing about that is, as it's closer to 2, you only need to level it twice to hit power level 4, which is the all-important order point will be given to you. So it'll help you all of them will help your action economy. So you just have to ask yourself what stat will actually be most useful. Deceit does all that for deceit, so 2 deceit. Destruction. This one is basically for bullying other people. If you like making a lot of demands and using the diplomacy tree a lot, this is probably one worth picking up, as if they go along with you and don't try to pick a fight, either accepting an insult or giving you the money when you make demands or all that, you gain bonus prestige from that. And so if you're in a position of power and have this, by all means abuse the hell out of the diplomatic system, and you'll be raking in quite a lot of prestige if people are scared of you. And if you're want to be more aggressive, still do it, because if they basically say, okay, here's money, here's okay, you can say what you want about me, I'm not going to do anything. If they capitulate 3 times, you can just outright declare them weak in the council, and thus not deserving of any legal protections of an archfiend, and thus outright declare war right then and there. This is very bad for your opponent, because this means they can no longer truly protect their borders through diplomatic means. They have to use their military. And it's also a way the game allows people to deal with people who are trying to turtle and just are like, oh, and try to basically pay off everyone and have no pride as a demon, basically. Infernal Rake of Marquis. So you basically start with a promotion, so your opening money draws are a little bit better. Your diplomacy actions are a little stronger. Okay, but getting to 30 isn't too hard, and all this does is save you some starting prestige. And if it's a close game, yeah, this could make a difference. But I don't see this as being as strong as, well, let's say a stat +2. This one's a good one if you like making as much money as possible, especially if you combine it with the ring that gives you an extra draw, as this makes your tribute a little bit better, so you'll get more money per higher value coins to select whenever you get draw tribute. A very good one, and not bad if you're trying to rush leveling power or other things, because everything costs something in this game, and having a nice surplus of money is always nice. This also lets you recover from treasury getting looted, or just having your tokens getting melted a bit easier. Prophecy level 2. Bonus to melee attribute based off of Wrath. Melee is usually a decently powered on many legions, and if you're going for a more legion-focused playstyle, this is worth going for, because especially it's a good thing it's on Azeroth here. What is his name? Astaroth, yeah. But yeah. Who starts out at Wrath 2 anyway, so all of his units will have a +2 melee just from the start. And get that up to 6, that's a +6 to the melee stat. And it just makes your legions a bit more powerful. And it's not a bad one to have if you're going to focus on Wrath. Sorcerer's Blight, basically the same thing, but for Infernal, based off of your destruction stat. Infernal is often a very high stat on many units, and it's meant to be a final, basically if you don't kill you'll find that many legions, if you don't kill them in the first 2 phases, will hit back so hard that they'll probably kill your unit, or at least significantly damage them. And if the turn order is wrong, it can turn against you, and it makes the Infernal phase arguably the scariest phase. Outside. And making that a little bit more potent is not a bad idea. But the problem with Infernal versus melee or ranged is it comes last in the tree, and thus of these 3 amulets, this one is the weakest just because of where it falls in the order of operations of battle. So if you want a bonus, probably these 2. If you're trying to go for mage dominance, maybe you have trying to get a Praetor that has Infernal go first, or all that, it's worth picking up. But if you're trying to use stratagems to manipulate the battle order, you might as well just go Wrath, because that's high level Wrath. Anyway. And since Wrath has nothing to do with destruction, at least not directly, this is probably the least value of the Trinity, as I said. And +2 to Wrath. Now the crowns are when things get really interesting, because they eat all 3 slots. They have potentially the most powerful abilities, but at the same time, you're going all in on it. And this is where the truly game-changing powers are. +1 movement to all units, very useful, as it helps you wall in the map in the early game easier. Esbeth starts with this, I believe, as her default, and it's pretty. And in her case, there's no point in trying to do a sneak strategy, whereas you pretend, because no one can actually see these, you just pretend that, oh, I'm going to just not use my full movement, just move 2, or move 1, or move 3, depending on whatever the base for that legion is. And then, when war starts or something, you just use all your full movement in a quick push, and those who thought they were out of range actually were in range, and get screwed with pretty and fucked over pretty hard. It's a very good thing to do in that regard, but it takes a lot of commitment, and you're basically sacrificing an advantage to try to do a sneaky like that. But more mobility is always a good option, especially if you're trying to focus on map control and more traditional 4X gameplay. Crown of Authority, 50% off buying ranks. This is probably, in my opinion, one of the weaker crowns, because while the higher powers are definitely expensive, you'll be generating bonus prestige just by ranking up anyway, so it's kind of a double-edged sword here. What you'll be gaining is will it offset the costs of buying it anyway? Or we'll buy it anyway over time. But because it's a 50% off bonus, it does create a compounding bonus. So let's say you're going from Duke to Prince. That's a 100 prestige cost, which is quite pricey. Well, now it's 50. And now, since you got to Prince earlier, you're generating bonus prestige just for being a Prince, and it will pay not only that difference in the initial costs faster, it will produce bonuses, a better bonus over time. If you're worried about the prestige race, this can be useful. But you can just go charisma for those bonuses, but I could see how if you play this on a charisma character, you can just get an absolute steamroll of prestige. But if you get too ahead too fast, don't be surprised if everyone just starts hitting with demands and vendettas and all that, and hope desperately that they can win enough of them that they can just declare a blood feud with you and wipe you off the map. And it's also it's less useful as well if you are trying to go for a conqueror victory and take over Pandemonium. But it's not a bad one. None of these crowns are truly bad, but this is, like I said, one of the weaker ones, because it only affects your prestige. Prestige, some diplomacy, pull quality, but this is probably one of the least dynamic, I should say. It's more subtle. Crown of Bureaucracy is a good example of the inverse. This gives you a third action point to start with, and will help you reach the maximum action points of 6 much sooner. With this, you can actually hide pretty well just by doing an extra gather tribute option, and so you can hide this pretty easily. And one of the benefits of hiding the fact you have this is, well, if you're doing a deceit build and you use masked abilities or impersonations, you can basically screw with people, and they won't know it's you because they will assume you have an action less than you really do. And having an extra action point sooner also means you build up money faster. You're a little bit more versatile in what you can do because you can just do more things earlier. And I do believe Belial starts with this as his default. So you have no benefit really hiding from him because everyone expects you to have it. Crown of Intolerance. This is very... this is a nasty one because you can declare Blood Feud after a single successful vendetta. So you just win one battle, say you're on their border, you can swarm a place of power, take it in one turn, done. And then you can immediately follow up with a Blood Feud and wipe that player off the map and out of the game entirely if you can take out their stronghold. If you combine that with a Kill Legion vendetta to acquire the Blood Feud, and you take out their only Legion, they are basically at your mercy. And there's nothing they can do. That's GG. At least for that individual player. But do be careful, because if anyone discovers you have this, and you play it too strong too fast, don't be surprised if, rather than getting into vendettas, everyone's just doing Praetor duels. Because they don't want you anywhere near... They want you on the warpath. And Crown of the Administrator generates an additional prestige per turn per place of power. This does a lot of compound interest, and it works very good with charisma builds. So you take 2 places of power relatively early. By the time anyone takes them, you've generated quite a bit of prestige, which will help you rank up faster and build up a lead in the race to the throne for the standard election victory. And everything I said about this one applies to this one, because they basically do the same thing, but in slightly different ways. This just gives you a discount on getting ranks. This helps you get the prestige to get ranks faster. But because this you can use prestige for diplomatic actions, this helps you recoup those costs a little faster and engage in more diplomacy. So I would edge this one out more than this one. The Crown of Administrator over Crown of Authority. And now are probably the most underhanded ones are coming up now. Crown of the Kingmaker. Basically, in the first 10 turns, you nominate somebody who you believe is going to win. Considering the average game is between 4 to 6 players, that means you have a 33% to a 20% chance of just guessing somebody who's going to win. And since you have a 10-turn window to choose, if someone seems like they know their shit, you can adjust those odds in your favor. And if they go to a full election victory, so they can't take over Pandemonium, for example, and they win through prestige, you claim the victory instead. Yeah, you steal someone else's victory. You could be dead last, playing like a complete moron, but because you chose the right person early in the game, you win. And this is one of the reasons why I say forced excommunications are kind of an intentional game design, because yes, it's an extreme thing to do, and it completely wrecks someone's game. But is that really that much better than a Kingmaker just saying, I win because I chose you? Then is the Power Behind the Throne Crown, which is similar to Kingmaker, but it actually requires some role-playing, and it's actually trickier to pull off than it seems. Oh, it's also worth mentioning, you can go for if you look like you're going to win through the prestige victory, that works too. But not so much with this one. Because you have to let yourself be vassalized by another player. And if the person you're vassalized to wins through an election victory, Again, can't take over Pandemonium. You stab him in the back and take the throne for yourself at the last minute. This is more thematic, but since you have to play a point of weakness for some time and have someone actually be willing to take you on as a vassal, because you can't make someone vassalize you by force, you have to, it's all voluntary. You can propose, they can propose to you, but it can be turned down. And because this crown exists, it makes people worried about taking vassals in the first place. But having a vassal has its perks. You can travel through each other's territory freely. You cannot war with each other. The Lord does take half the prestige of the vassal when they first make it, but you still earn prestige on your own. However, you can no longer win an electric victory regardless of how much prestige you collect. This is why excommunication can be useful, because it can break a vassalization. In fact, excommunication breaks all diplomatic ties that may be binding you. You share diplomatic status. So if you get into a war, or your lord gets into a war, you can be targeted by either the person that your lord's fighting, or if the person you're at war can attack your lord's people. You could use that for some ways to screw with the person ahead of you, but if without this crown, even with this crown, there's just not much benefit to screw with your lord other than, I'm going to rush Pandemonium, and I'm just trying to fuck with you. But as you can see, both of these two crowns basically allow the underdog to force a win in similar but different ways. And I believe power behind the throne has the priority when it comes to if, say, one player chooses your lord as their puppet, and you're wearing this one, the two would come into conflict. So let's actually just check that out real quick in the Encyclopedia Infernum. Victory. Tyranny of the Usurper. Manipulation victories. Both target and good standing. So neither of you can be excommunicated. Power behind the throne will have the priority, simply because, well, you had to put in more work to be the power behind the throne than a Kingmaker. Which makes sense. But, I don't want to quit yet. But that is the relics. And certain relics do work a little bit better on some lords, like what I was saying about Murmur having one of the weakest starts. This actually makes him a great Kingmaker or power behind the throne lord, simply because you're going to have a hard time starting out due to having a relatively weak legion, and playing weak in the beginning, getting to be a lord, being a vassal just to help, just to stab the guy in the back, it works. But anyone can choose anything, you can experiment, but just remember you cannot change these core stats. And so there's no benefit for, let's say, Murmur to take the Destruction level 2 Amulet, simply because he already starts with it, and so there's no benefit. It's not going to jump you to level 4. But he could, for example, take level 2 Deceit, or level 2 Prophecy and get a small boost there, and thus have more spell slots so he can cast more spells. Which is, if you're going for a caster type character, an interesting thing to focus on. Or let's take Beelzebub. As Beelzebub has no charisma, this means Praetor duels are one of the weaknesses Beelzebub has, so just give her the charisma one, and now that covers that weakness a little bit. And as you can see, I doubled down on money here on Mamnon, and Max, which, given his themes and abilities, it works out really well, but anyone can go full economy with these relics, not just him. In fact, Andromedus is just as good at it because he still has the 2 charisma. And this will, and going full economy will help him get those high-level Praetors faster. When combined with his thing, he can just dominate arena combat, and there's not much anyone can do other than try to steal it with Bribe Praetor. Although there are certain dual abilities that could screw him over, but that's a subject for another video. Thank you all for watching, and have a good night.